For the last 6 months, I have been feeling a hand caress my calf about once a week. My husband has shaken this off by the fan and blanket, but I had assured him this wasn't the cause. Last week, I heard him walk down a creaky staircase, which I hear every day when he goes to work. No big thing. But it was a holiday, and we were both home. I always check my clock every time he does this, and it was almost 7 a.m. Later that day, I mentioned this occurrence, and he says it wasn't him. 2 days ago, I hear steps going down again, this time at 2 a.m. because I always check my clock. Again, not him. Today he told me that he thought I came into his room around 11 p.m. last night and cuddled him to the point where he shook his left hand and said, "That's enough." He then reached over and felt nothing. This was from the wall side of his room. Neither of us have felt negative energy, if not more of a loving feeling more from this interaction. What could it be? How can we reduce the interactions? We have a toddler. My house was built in the 1940s, only one previous owner, and in Kentucky. When I was younger, my grandpa used to tell me stories that happened to him when he used to live in Arizona, but this one stuck with me and affected me personally. His old house, which now is one of the family's properties, is Victorian and has 3 stories, a third one being an attic. His old place is located in a small, quiet suburb with mid-cost houses. Neighbors are friendly, and all the nothing weird ever seems to happen. He used to tell me that one night he woke up because of screeching of an animal in pain that was coming from his front yard. He got his old camera and started to film. When he got out to see exactly the source of the sound, he said he saw a very bright green light that was coming from behind the trees. He ran back to his home and rewatched the tape. Turns out, the camera did not capture anything. Anyways, the story is scary on its own. But here's the catch. Last summer, me and my fam went to his house to spend a week there. We really enjoyed the countryside and the quietness of it. One of those nights, me and my sister were talking, and we hear a really loud engine sound like a helicopter flew right above our head. We looked out our window and saw the same green light that my grandpa described. Next day, when we woke up after breakfast, me and my sister had a walk into the forest to check if there was anything out there. After like 5 minutes, we walk our way back to the house, and on our front porch we see 2 men dressed with black heavy clothes, a hat and sunglasses, I think, ringing the doorbell of our home. Me and my sister got back in from the backyard door, and when we asked my mom for info on what they wanted, she told us that they are investigating a case and wanted to know if she knows anything. So, this is not my story. It's actually my mom's. For context, whether you believe in ghosts or not, I can tell you from my experience that weird shit was going on in my childhood home. If anyone's interested, I could tell some of my many stories from it. So this was probably 18 years ago or so. My dad used to work at a pest control company, and my mom stayed home looking after me and my younger brother. One day while we were at school, my mom was home alone when she heard the back door open. My dad always parked in the back and came through the back door. She got up to greet him, wondering why he was home so early. He immediately walked by her as if she didn't exist. She followed him, asking him what was wrong. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs and stared at her, not saying a word. She continued to ask him what was going on, but again he didn't answer. He climbed the stairs and she heard the bathroom door shut. She was confused, went into the kitchen to clean or do dishes or something when her phone started to ring. She checked it, seeing it was my dad calling. Why is he calling me from upstairs? but she assumed it was to apologize for whatever was going on with him, only for him to tell her he wasn't too busy that day, so he was on his way home. She immediately ran upstairs and checked all the rooms, only for nobody to be there. She was home alone. This has always scared me to the core. I heard a similar story a while ago on YouTube. I can't remember exactly, but it reminded me of this story. Anyone experienced anything like this? Either way, very creepy. I'll make my encounter quick and humorous. The other day, my friend told me, "Hey, something weird happened here. Can you come and stay the day alone while I'm at work far away?" I said, "Yes, I have nothing better to do." So I packed my bag and off I went. All morning passed and nothing so far. I worked out a bit, so showered next. I'm in the shower, and the bedroom door opens and slams shut twice. I know it was closed because I made sure of it myself. As I sat in the living room earlier waiting, I said, "Hey sis, you back early? Give me a second and I'll be out." No response. I change and I walk out. Nothing but to find the bedroom door open. I said out loud, "Oh hey Satan, you come to play? Little slammed doors won't scare me away." I'll use a simple technique. I turn off the lights, close the curtains, light a candle, and say, come out and play." I went around the house saying things like, "You like the dark? I'm in your cave. Oh, show yourself and blow me away." Funny thing, I arrived at the bathroom. Inside, I stared. I started to choke away. My God, little Satan. Very cruel joke. It seems he wants to play, bend me over, and put me on my knees. Maybe he wants me dead. As I laughed, and I touched my throat with my left hand, with my right shaking. I reached in my pocket for holy water, and I also sprayed away. He let go and ran away. No time to cook and make a meal. I feel so much energy to rid this house of bad juju shit. This home is now mine, so Satan shoo away. When performing a cleaning of a home, expect the unexpected. To be ready and don't run away. I'll keep this experience short in writing and try to explain it the best I can. I was hanging out in my room alone watching TV. Something on the side of my view caught my attention. I noticed a head figure slowly coming out of the mirror that I have in the hallway. That moment I felt time slow down. Everything felt almost in slow motion. I forgot about the TV and everything else. I feel an adrenaline rush, sweating, nervous, my heart beating fast, hair standing up on my arms, neck. I feel frozen. Room feels cold. Time has slowed down. I feel my mind and my body is preparing me for something there is no way out of. I feel trapped in this moment. All of my senses are intensified and focused, that I truly feel afraid that I must face this moment or pass out, whichever comes first. I feel a presence of something evil is among me, and now it has fully manifested itself, and it's standing right there in my hallway. I can see it in the corner of my eye. From the moment I spotted her head coming out of the mirror, I watched her fully come out of the mirror, from shoulders, legs to her whole body, beginning to end, and it's all happening in my peripheral vision. Again, I am frozen with fear. I'm looking straight. I can see it on my side view. That is a lady in a white dress coming out of the mirror. Somehow, through the fear, I managed to slowly start turning my head to see this human figure in my hallway. I can't help it. I see a lady dressed in white standing in my hallway. I feel an energy or atmosphere in the air that is evil, dark, alone and cornered in my room. There's nothing I can do. My arms and body are lightly shaking. My eyes focused on her legs or so. When I start moving up as I make eye contact with this lady, she is already staring at me. I feel has been since she got out of the mirror. We lock eyes and she tilts her head. I let out a scream of terror and a fuck that follows, while also jumping backwards, petrified. I can't move. In a second, as I blink, it's gone. Left there in my room frozen, scared, and in disbelief. All I can think is, what the fuck? I need to get out of here. I have had my share of living in haunted houses and have lived through all that comes with them. Somewhat felt like a residual, intelligent haunting in some experiences, rarely even demonic at times. This was in a whole different ballpark. It takes me a few seconds or so to catch my breath and snap out of this frozen state I'm in. I get my mind back to normal as I slowly relax. I get up, walk around contemplating whether I should leave or not. Everything feels normal again. The energy or presence of this lady is gone, and I feel okay other than being scared half to death. Plus, where can I go? This was my home at the time. This moment probably lasted 30 seconds to a minute. It felt like forever at the time I was experiencing it. This event tormented me mentally for a few months, questioning my own sanity at times. FYI, I don't consume alcohol or do any drugs. I was sober. It's been a year or so since this even happened. I have a few more experiences that have happened to me in my life, but this one is easily in the top 3. When I have time, I will share them. Thanks for reading. Was this a ghost, a lost soul, demon, portal haunting? I might edit this if I feel I can explain it better. I'm back. I believe I posted in here before. So, a couple days ago, my brother said he woke up around 2 to 3 a.m. and heard my voice. I'm his sister. And I was upstairs sleeping with my baby girl. Anyways, I said, "Can I come in? I have your son." He didn't answer and went back to sleep. He doesn't have a son. There was an instance years ago. My dad was in the basement smoking and heard my mom open the door and say, "Can I come down?" And he thought, oh yeah, she wants to smoke. So he said, "Yes, come down." Nobody came down. And when he went to check, the door was closed and my mom was gone. I've heard heels walking upstairs from the basement before mimicking my mom. Then months ago, my brother, he's 20, he used to see them when he was like 13. Did a cleansing, and then it stopped. Anyways, he had sleep paralysis and saw the same girl he saw when he was younger. She walked up to him and held his hand. What are everyone's thoughts on this? It's a little creepy, but I mean, we can't control it, so it's like, do we just ignore it? Last summer, I went to stay a few weeks with my sister and her husband in Utah. Sister's friend, M, for privacy purposes, was also staying over. My sister had also agreed to watch a different friend's 2 dogs while he was out of town for work for a couple days. One night, I was woken up, maybe around midnight, by the 2 dogs outside because we didn't know how they would interact with my sister and husband's cats. Starting going absolutely crazy, barking insanely loud for a long time. Em also wakes up and comes into the living room, where I was sleeping on the couch. We were just talking, wondering why the dogs are acting up. Then we hear this howl. It was close, but far enough that we knew it wasn't either of the dogs. It was also extremely distorted. I'm not sure how to explain it, but it just wasn't like anything neither me or I, neither Em or I heard before. Em and I thought it may have been a skinwalker, but now I want to hear other people's thoughts. Any idea as to what this may have been? quick context in case it might add to the story. I'm 24 now, and I'm Native American. During the time of this story, I did not practice witchy stuff, but now I do. Also, anytime I went to the property with my dad, my friends and I always stayed in a separate camper to ourselves so we could stay up late and not keep my dad and stepmother awake. My dad owns a property in Virginia that he visits every weekend. He turned it into some sort of farm. There's basically a bit of mountain with a small field on top of it and a much larger one below it. He has goats, cattle, and a donkey. He had the farm for about 11 years now. During my years through middle school and all through high school, I went with him every single weekend. Most times I'd bring a friend every weekend. We found out about 2 years into owning the property that the land used to be a Native American camp. There's also a small cave on the edge of the property that we found out has skeletal human remains in a certain part of it. The cave used to only have an opening on top of a part of a mountain, where sometimes tribal members would be thrown down as part of a sacrifice. We found out this spot was an old native camp because 2 men showed up to our property one day and explained it to us. I asked for permission to go through one of the fields my dad had recently sort of dug up in preparation to plant seed for corn. Now there's a cavern you can crawl into at the bottom where water runs out. The water was sort of carved out a tight place where you can crawl through on your stomach. I've never been into it myself, but my dad has. I'm too scared to go through it because during the summers when it's warm enough to crawl through the water, there are usually hundreds of cave crickets and spiders on the ceiling, which the ceiling is low enough already where your back is going to brush against it the whole way through. I bring this up because my dad doesn't believe in the paranormal whatsoever. But when he has told me he gets a bad feeling for that cave. There used to be an old rotting house on the property next to where our campers were. It was built really weird, sort of like a spiral. It went living room, kitchen, sunroom. In the sunroom, you could go left and it went into another room. Smaller unknown room with a bathroom. Turn left again and it was a bedroom. And there was a staircase leading up to the attic from there. Most of my friends and I absolutely love the paranormal and everything around this topic. Specifically me and this friend named Allie. One day, right as it was starting to turn dark, Allie and I went into the house. We stepped into the living room area and heard a thud from the attic. We were a bit nervous, but went on into the kitchen before we heard something start stomping across the floor above us. It sounded like it was heading directly towards the stairs to come down. It was too large to be something like a raccoon or a possum, and a bear wouldn't have gotten into it due to how the house was built. Allie and I ran out and we stood on the porch for a moment looking into the window, but never saw anything. We decided not to go back in and went to ride ATVs and such for the rest of the evening just to have fun. A year or two later, my ex-girlfriend and I were at the farm in our camper. I'll call her E. E was heavily into paranormal stuff, even more so than I was. One night, we were playing games on our computers together. It was about 11 p.m.-ish. At that time, our camper sat on a hill that overlooked the cornfield. And it also sat over the hill, over the side of one of my dad's farm sheds, where we specifically see the side door and not the front huge barn door. Basically, look out the left window and see a cornfield. Look out the side window and see the door. There was a lot of moonlight at the time, so it wasn't pitch black and we could see the field and everything else. I remember we heard something faintly scratch on the side of our camper, which is what made us look outside. We looked out towards the cornfield for a few minutes and never saw anything. The field was a good ways away, still very visible. We both saw it. What looked like a head was going through one of the rows of cornfields. It was going in such a way, though, that it didn't look like it was walking, but maybe gliding. We both panicked a bit and closed the curtains and tried to distract ourselves. The next night, we actually ended up using a Ouija board, one that E had brought from home. We weren't having any luck with it at all and decided to put it up. We decided to try and tell each other creepy stories to try and make up for the disappointment from the Ouija board. At one point, we both looked out of the side window that faced towards the side of the barn. There were reeds and such growing near the door, but we both kept talking about how one specific reed looked like an arm that was reaching out of the door. We kept joking about it for a bit, but after a few minutes, I shit you not, that arm-looking thing reached around to the door handle. We didn't see what it did because we both freaked out and ducked down to hide after we turned the light off. We sat in silence for a good 30 minutes, and I don't remember much after that. Since then, we had a ton of other weird occurrences. And about 4 years ago, my niece and I decided that we might be dealing with a Wendigo. The reason why is because she and I were going through the trails on one of our ATVs together with our small Chihuahua, Tiny. We were using one of the ATVs that was shaped like a golf cart, had a cover and glass over it, etc., had multiple seats. It has stormed recently at the time, so we were going through the clearing branches off of our usual riding paths and just having fun in general. Every time my niece and I would get out of the ATV, Tiny would stay in the middle seat and just watch us and wait until we got back in. We always stayed in his sight, though. He was a very clingy boy. At some point, Tiny started getting nervous and making whining sounds and letting out little yips. We started smelling something that smelled like rotting flesh. We didn't think much of it at first, and thought we might be near a deer or something that had passed away, until we heard something from a different direction that sounded like Tiny, but it sounded like something had tried to mimic Tiny's whines. This is when my niece and I got a bit panicked. We hopped back on the ATV and sped back to the campers. Again, my dad doesn't believe in things like this, and we tried to bring it up to him, but he laughed and said it was probably a bear or something. We went into our camper and sort of stayed there until it got dark, and until my dad and stepmother went into their own camper. As it was getting darker, we kept seeing something moving around the tree line, which was probably about 200-ish feet away from the camper we stayed in. Once it got completely dark, it was about an hour until we started experiencing stuff that actually left my niece scarred, as well as me. The camper we stayed in was one of those small ones that just slides into the back of a truck. Super tiny. Something brushed up against the side of the camper, enough to make it tilt a bit, and started shaking once it hit the ground again. Then we started hearing something breathing heavily right outside. And at one point, the door handle started to open, but then stopped. My niece was crying at that point. And just a note, my niece was 14 at the time. She loved scary stuff, and even went walking in the woods with me at night on the property just for fun. So it was very unlike her to get this scared. I was scared myself, so we both went quiet for a long time. After we heard the scratches and breathing for a while longer, it went quiet again. We were both too scared to even move or make noise, so we ended up staying awake until daylight, and we heard my parents awake outside. Once we heard that, we both finally laid down and went to bed to sleep for a few hours. If people got this far and are interested in more of the creepy things I've dealt with, I'm happy to share it, but it's a long story, so I'm doubtful. The past 2 years, I finally got my first boyfriend, and we still go to my dad's property with him on occasion. My boyfriend was a skeptic until some of the things he witnessed with me up there. I already have a comment about this without sounding like a story. I'll get straight to the point. I live with my mother, my stepdad, and my sister. And around December, my mother came up to me telling me last night around 12 while I was asleep. I came into her room, woke her up, and said I was going to the bathroom. My stepdad said he heard this, but not visibly seen it like my mother. She then said I exited to the hallway. She walked into my room to find me asleep. And ever since then, I've seen several people saying child ghosts typically mimic another person. This is just my way of telling people this without them thinking I'm crazy. I live in a pretty rural area, a small farming town. I grew up on a cattle ranch. Recently, a few cows have gotten slaughtered. Not ours, but a family friend's. The town has never had a case like this, so our sheriff reached out to authorities in different states that are more well known to having skinwalkers. I haven't heard much of this case recently, but that being said, a few days after the cows were killed, I saw what I believe was a skinwalker. It was the middle of the night, and I was driving down this barely used dirt road. After taking a sharp turn, I see a creature run across the road not far in front of me. I'm the only person around, so it couldn't have somehow been a person. The creature was definitely not a coyote. It was way too big. Definitely not a deer either. The only animal I could possibly think of would be a mountain lion. Then again, we don't really have those here. It has a boxy head, long slender legs, and a long body. Its face is indescribable. Almost animal, almost human. A few nights later, I heard something outside my window. Then I heard a huge bang. Something was tapping on the window. I could hear its hand run down the glass. You know, that almost screeching noise. A few minutes later, I could hear howling, but it wasn't a real howl. It sounded almost human, or like something pretending to howl. Now, I'm not sure what this creature was, but it definitely creeped me the hell out, and I really have no explanations. So, we had a power outage at work today for about a minute. I had my back to a wall of mirrors and a coworker in front of me, facing me. As I was getting out my phone to turn on my flashlight, she nervously says, "There's someone behind you." Then the lights came back on. I yelled at her thinking she was messing with me, but she said she was serious, and I could tell by her voice she was rattled. I asked again, "Are you serious?" To which she replied, "Yes. He wasn't behind you in person, but I could see he was behind you in the reflection of the mirror. It all happened so quick." She said he was tall and dark. I didn't see it, so I'm sure she's more freaked out than I am. Just very strange way to end the workday. So I'm guessing it's a shadow person? Any thoughts? I got something or someone in a cemetery. I know the title is a little crazy, but I'm afraid this thing is following me at this point. Yesterday, me and my family went visiting my grandfather at the cemetery. They are this kind of crypts and corridors where they are connected. So I went to the other corridor. I walked up to an old crypt with too much dust on the door. In the door it says in the dust, "Help, please." And next there is half of a handprint in glass. Many bad words under it. I ignored it and just keep walking. But in my mind, I was thinking if someone needed my help there. While I walked, I saw one crypt with the windows closed, and it keeps my attention. But I decided to continue until, next to my ear, I hear the door of the crypt that was right next to me knocked, but in a strange way. I don't know if the way it knocked is essential for the next thing that happened. If it is, tell me please. And that's when I started running. After that, I felt sick for about 4 days, and it just kept getting worse. And the experience started feeling unreal. I know I experienced it. My family saw me running, but in my mind it feels like it was just a dream. Today I was dreaming bad about some things. Then when in my dream I see something, I feel something touching my back, and I woke up again, feeling like it didn't happen, but knowing it did. I'm afraid I got something in my house, or even worse, my family. Anyone knows what it can be or why it followed me. Update. One day before this experience, I got a gift, a little amber bracelet. It was totally fine, but today I realized one of the amber pebbles is discolored and broken. Does this mean anything? For 12 years, I've worked as an actor for a local haunted house attraction. It's a lot of fun, as I get to play a variety of horror characters and act out different scenes. While the tours we put on are clearly fake, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that isn't. I would start off by explaining that the building we do this out of is extremely old and was once an elementary school. We gutted the section of the building that was classrooms and constructed it to what we needed. This is when we actually started having weird experiences. There's plenty of activity that can be shrugged off, such as feeling watched and hearing footsteps running in areas there is no one. Then there are things not so easy to disregard, such as one evening, a member was working on hooking up our sound system by himself. He had not even hooked the large speakers up yet when he stated a loud, deep growl came booming through them. This terrified him so much he ran out of the building and would not go back in, even lock up, until another member came down to go in with him. He never worked alone in that building again. Other activity seems playful and childlike, such as hearing small giggles and whispering in the halls and in rooms that are empty. Things being moved from where we last placed them. One year, I was in a rocking chair that I would jump out of as a group came through. The thing about the rocking chair is it was more like a glider, and it was broken. I would have to use a lot of force to get the chair to rock backwards at all. It was right before showtime. I was sitting in this broken chair, getting mentally pumped up for the night ahead. I was completely alone when I felt someone grab onto the back of the chair and harshly push it backwards. I felt myself flying backwards when the chair, and I honestly thought I would flip out of it. Thankfully, this did not happen. And as soon as I stabilized myself, I jerked to see who had done this. The room I was in was large, and no one could get out of this room without me seeing them running away in the split second it took me to look behind me. There was absolutely no one there, and I was suddenly covered in goosebumps. No one was even in the area around my room at the time. Later, the same night, the lights were off, my strobe light was on, and a group had just left my room when I noticed a small figure in the right-hand corner of the room. It looked like a small child crouching down, looking my way, and I was immediately worried that a child had been left behind from the previous group. As I headed towards the figure to ask if they were okay, the strobe light flashed and the figure was completely gone. This same year, but different night, I was again sitting in my chair, waiting for the next group, when someone or something growled right in my ear. It was so loud that it caused my ear to ring, and when I turned to see what it was, there was nothing there, just an empty room. I changed rooms the next year, and I did not experience as much creepy phenomenon. There's not much history I've been able to find out about the building, but I'm so curious as to what could be causing all the weirdness. This is only a tiny bit of what has been experienced over the years working there, and I don't feel like it will be stopping anytime soon. I would like to start off by saying I am non-religious and also a skeptic. This strange phenomenon has haunted me for so long. I've been scared to speak out, as every time I have, I was never taken seriously, even when I was trying to figure it out without a paranormal lens, which is understandable, I guess. This story begins when I was 12. Me and my family went to Port-au-Prince, Haiti, for vacation. At the time, I had no belief in the paranormal or supernatural. The first night I went to sleep and woke up late at night to the sound of a very loud scream that sounded like a female in pain. I thought it was my mom, but then it continued. More and more screams from different people. I could clearly pick out the characteristics such as gender, an estimation of the age, and an estimation of the pain. I also heard distorted laughter and gates opening and closing. Some of the houses had gates. Some of the screams came from strange locations. For example, I heard some come from upwards, on the ceiling, or in the sky. This continued all night, all the way up until the morning around 6 a.m. I heard what sounded like a truck horn multiple times following by screams, and then it all stopped, like nothing happened. This continued the entire 2 weeks that I was there, some days with less screams and some days with more. Everyone else I was there with claimed to experience these things, young adults and old adults and other people my age, and it was normal to them because they have been there for so long. Even while typing this, I feel like a crazy person, but I know what I heard. I hope to be able to go back someday and seriously investigate this through the lens of science. This has been something that people have talked about locally in Haiti for a long time and have real investigatable evidence. They are even able to predict some key characteristics of this phenomenon. I will leave research up to you if you want to know more from the locals. Has anyone experienced something similar while in Haiti? Maybe specifically at Port-au-Prince? First time posting on this subreddit. I want to share my experience in my 2 ghost tours of an old prison in Coburg. First, brief history of Pentrid. Opened in 1851 after old Melbourne jail got overcrowded. Housed many of Victoria's worst criminals over its time, including serial killers, gangsters, and was home to 11 executions, including the last in Australian history, and countless other deaths, all buried in a mass grave near the H Division. Only the aforementioned H Division is standing as it was when the prison closed in 1997. First time I, 23 Mel, went was for the most macabre second day ever, but we were both superstitious after both having previous experience with paranormal. First thing I noticed when I entered the building was it felt odd. It felt alive with energy despite there being nothing in it. Those who believe in ghosts probably know what I'm talking about. Anyway, the tour continued as normal, and the tour guide was telling great stories of what prison life used to be like. The guide then asked for a volunteer to stand in a cell by themselves for a while. My date, 24 female, put her hand up and was shut into the cell. The cell was 9 feet by 6 feet by 9 feet, and with about a 3-inch thick heavy metal door. This cell had a pentagram on the floor, but only for effect, as there were no recorded Satanist or associated rituals in the prison at any time. Whilst my date was in there, the rest of the group moved to another part of the prison. Still had line of sight to the cell my date was in. About 2 minutes after my date came barging out of the cell, saying, "Nope, nope, nope," and was clearly frazzled. She said that she was standing there saying the Rosemary prayer, and she was Catholic. She said that she immediately felt as though she wasn't alone and was being drawn into the back right-hand corner of the cell. She started to struggle to breathe, although she managed to focus on taking deep breaths and the feeling subsided. But then she felt a warm breath on the back of her neck, which she left. That cell belonged to American-born serial killer Eddie Leonsky, aka the Brown-Out Strangler, who murdered 3 women in Albert Park during his deployment to help the Australian war effort in 1942. Here's where things get interesting. Leonsky was known for getting drunk and singing in a high-pitched womanly voice at pubs at night, which made him a bit of an attraction for fellow pub-goers, and many started singing along with him. All 3 women he murdered were one of those people who sang with him. Leonsky confessed to liking those women's voices as they were vaudeville performers or professional vocalists. So as they were taking their dying breath, he would physically suck their breath out of their mouths with the hopes to gain their vocal skills. My date was a trained opera singer. I personally didn't have anything super noteworthy happen aside from getting a super heavy feeling in my stomach and chest when I was in the cell of a former Surrey road gang leader, Mark Chopper Reed. My date also had a similar feeling in the adjacent cell, and the night was capped off by a jump scare from a mannequin that was placed right in the doorway of a closed cell that the tour guide said to look in, as there was a plaque with information about the history of the prison, which there was, but the guide was also well aware of the mannequin and was laughing when the group had a mini heart attack after opening the cell door. The second visit was about 6 months later with my now long-term girlfriend, 23 female. This time, the prison felt different. It felt very heavy. Felt like we weren't wanted in there. At this point, my girlfriend grabbed my hand, looked at me, and took a exasperated breath. The tour started, and my girlfriend promptly took me to the back of the group so she could lean on a wall as she said her knee started to get the shakes. We were standing there for roughly 5 minutes, and she whispered in my ear that she needed to step outside. So I excused myself from the group and took her outside and sat down. She then explained to me that she was starting to black out and felt like she was completely drained of all energy, and she visually looked pale, which takes a lot considering she is a dark-skinned woman. I prayed for her protection. We are both Christian, and convinced her to go back in as it was an expensive tour, and we had only been in there for 5 of the 90-minute tour. She apprehensively agreed, but clung to my arm the whole night. At one point, I started losing circulation in my arm. I did stand by myself in a few cells, and it seemed random what cells had chest-crushing heaviness or not. In fact, I think the main foyer area was heavier in the previous hotspots, as I felt nothing in Eddie Leonsky's cell. Apparently, he doesn't react to men in his cell. Coward in life, coward in death, I guess. And Chopper's cell felt like a friendly respite. Makes sense as he was known for his humor and charisma. Even the cell reserved for death row inmates was quiet. I did take a photo which does have an unexplained shadow that was unfortunately lost when I changed phones. Convenient, I know. I want to make this very clear, though. I fully believe in keeping an open mind and not jumping to conclusions when it comes to the unknown, such as ghosts. I am fully open to constructive criticism and can't say for certain that what I experienced was actually paranormal, despite me believing it was. All I want is respect on both sides of the argument, as I have experienced skeptics calling believers psychos and other toxic comments purely based on their belief in the paranormal. Keep it civil and raise each other up with healthy discussion rather than cutting each other down. Thanks for reading my essay. Happy to further discuss either publicly or privately. So, there were a couple things that happened around my house, leading to me believing it's haunted. For a little background, my house is an old church that was turned into a house. They added a trailer and resides on native land. It is also located near a cemetery. A couple of things happened around my house that caused me to believe it's haunted. The first instance was when I walked into my room and my closet door handle started turning on its own. At night, I hear stuff coming off the shelves and tables in my room. I have a few posters held on with superglue tape, and one of the said posters were pulled down in the middle of the night. I thought maybe I didn't stick it well enough, so I pushed it back, but it did this 2 more times before falling off. I put it back on, and it would be fine ever since. I also have a tapestry, and one of the metal tacks I used flew off across the room at nighttime. When I was younger, my stepdad found a doll in front of the church and decided to give it to me. I had always hated dolls, so I put it in a chest under my bed. A few nights later, I could hear the locks shaking. I've heard tapping, seen shadows, and always feel watched. My family has a history of ghosts as well. Should I set up a camera? Woke up one night to my license and card that has been missing suddenly near my bedside table. Went to check out the apartment, no sign of entry or either of the 2 doors nor windows unlocked. Everything was intact, just a few cupboards open along with the personal items just randomly showing up. I don't have any history of sleepwalking, intend to lock my apartment, but last night I locked the main doors, but just not my bedroom door. But I am the only one who lives in this mother-in-law's quarters apartment, and it's tucked away from the house. I fell asleep around 1:30 a.m. and woke up at 6:30 a.m. for work. And things were messed up and appeared like this, so it would have happened relatively quickly while I was asleep. I've heard noises in this apartment, but never worried about anything. When I was 7 to 8, I woke up and came straight downstairs as I was seeing black dots around my room. Obviously, in a state of panic, I cried into my mother's arms, and after half an hour of sitting on the couch, she went to get some medicine as she thought I was hallucinating. But while she was in the kitchen, 3 to 4 Victorian men in their late 60s, early 70s standing in a line facing me, dressed with a top hat. It wasn't a tall top hat nor a small one, almost medium-sized, and a pocket watch. Cigars smoking around them, almost a haze. 3 to 2 of them were short, and then the last one was taller, and they didn't open their mouths to talk to me, but told me telepathically to go home. This wasn't scary. They didn't have a intense feeling attached to them, but it was almost a neutral feeling. I've seen a lot of ghost spirits growing up, but they've all been in a time period from like the 1830 to 1920, so not sure if that means anything. My mom's friend thinks I'm clairvoyant, but I'm not sure what to do. What do you think? I had paranormal experiences in the home I grew up in. Here are a few that stood out to me. 1. While lying in bed trying to fall asleep, a drawer on the other side of my room opened with such force that it banged loudly as it reached its maximum length. I shared a room with my brother at the time, and this sent us both sprinting out of the room in fear. Number 2. One night at 4 a.m., I used to stay up very late. I noticed a vase near the edge of the kitchen top. To ensure no one accidentally knocked it over, I pushed it to the back of the kitchen top against the wall, a good 3/4 of a meter distance. Later, while watching TV, I very clearly hear the vase slide across the kitchen top, followed by it falling onto the ground and smashing. I was the only person awake in the house. Number 3. Someone came around to replace the wallpaper in the house. The man's name was Jeff. The very first patch of wallpaper that he tore off the wall revealed his name written underneath in red ink. He refused to do the job and left. Number 4. My dog will absolutely refuse to go upstairs in that house whenever we visit my mom, who still lives in the house. I have carried her upstairs before in the house, and she will tremble with fear and run downstairs as soon as I put her down. She has no issue running upstairs in my house, my in-laws' house, or my father's house. More than happy to answer questions if you have any. Hi guys, I just want to share this experience that happened when I was younger, and it still haunts me till this day. So it starts with me and my sister going to my aunt's in a little ghost town in South Dakota for a vacation. I'd say I was 12, somewhere around there anyways. It was the most scariest experience. There was many instances that happened, but I'm going to talk about one that scared me the most. It was still light outside, around 2-ish, and my aunt goes to get groceries with my cousins, and me and my sister stay home. It was about 30 minutes after everyone was gone. Me and my sister were out in the living room. I'm on the laptop, each other playing a game, and all of a sudden you hear a door close upstairs. Me and my sister look at each other, kind of spooked out, but didn't really think anything of it. Till about 3 minutes later, when we hear the water from the sink in the upstairs restroom start running, and at that point, I'm just in shock, because the water shouldn't even be running at all. Well, I sit there for about a minute, just to see if it turns off or something, but all of a sudden we hear a cup sounding like it is getting filled up, and it just drops on the floor. Then right after that, it just does it again. The cup getting filled with water, then falling. I'd say it happened about 5 to 6 times, and the whole time that it was happening, we both couldn't move. We were just staring at each other. Till finally my sister goes upstairs, and I follow her, but I end up in front of her and slowly walk up to the restroom, where you could hear a cup fall one last time. I finally have the courage to open the door, where there was nothing. No water on, no cup, no nothing, nada. Empty, regular restroom. As soon as we wrapped our head around what happened, we ran down the stairs and tried to open the door. But I couldn't. It felt like I was getting all choked up. But when we hear the restroom door close and water turn on again, oh hell nah. We ended up opening the door and waiting outside, crying our eyes out. I was hanging out with my friend at his house around 9 to 10 p.m. when he watched the door handle go down and the door opened 6 inches. And by that time he got up and checked, like there was nothing there. I already knew there was some kind of entity in his house. So I decided to say, if there are any paranormal entities or ghosts, make your presence known. As we sat silently waiting for a response, I didn't expect to get one. Not even 2 seconds later, though, it sounded like someone was scratching on the door. for dear life. To this day, I can't recreate the scratching I heard. The whole room went cold. My body was full of fear, and then the temp went back to normal, and the scratching stopped. My friend immediately got up and opened the door, searched all around, but found nothing. Fast forward a couple nights. I also happen to live a couple houses down from my friends, and I'm lying in bed, wide awake on the second story, trying to fall asleep. When I hear 2 knocks on my window. So like every human, I ran outside with a weapon, but no one was outside. How my house is designed, nothing could have possibly hit my window. Even a human couldn't get up there. A couple nights after this, yet again, at nighttime, this took place. I'm in my living room when I hear what I assume is the entity from a horror movie scream in my neighborhood. The type of scream that sends chills down your spine. Fast forward a couple nights later or something. I'm not good with dates. I'm in my garage chilling when I hear the entity I assume another horror movie scream. Super loud right outside my garage. I sprinted up the stairs so fast my lungs hurt. So bad from going so fast. The knocking, the scratching, and screaming were all terrifying. I should also add, I have no mental illnesses, and my friend was there to witness the scratching after I called the entity out. This is going to be a bit of a lengthy post, so bear with me. I live in an apartment in Pennsylvania. The building is over 100 years old, and it's right next to a funeral home. I've been here and never had any strange experience up until the last couple of weeks. I should also note I have a child that lives with me half the time, and the other half she's with her mom. On my night while I was drifting off to sleep, I started feeling onset of sleep paralysis. All my limbs were going stiff, and I started to feel pinned down. Luckily, I was able to snap myself out of it. The closest thing to ground myself, which was my phone. I was able to sleep fine after that. Then maybe a week later, my daughter is asleep in her room, which connects to my bedroom through a doorway that sits directly across from my bed. I woke up and saw the silhouette of a child standing against the wall next to the door frame for where my daughter's room would be. It was just the black mass darker than the room with no face or limbs or hair, and it just stood there like it was staring at me. Her door was still closed, and the figure was on the side that would be covered by the door if it were open. I was definitely freaked out, but chose to ignore it, turned my gaze away from it, and went back to sleep. When I woke up again, a couple hours later, it was gone like nothing ever happened. Fast forward a few days, my girlfriend and I are at a flea market, and I run into a medium selling her wares and talking to people. I told her what I was experiencing, and she looked concerned and told me to cleanse my apartment by burning sage. She also gave me a small vial of holy oil to put on my front entrance to keep bad spirits away. She also wanted me to put some on my daughter's forehead to protect her. The next day, my girlfriend and I go to the apartment and do the cleanse. While I was cleansing a room, my girlfriend was waiting in the kitchen, which is next to the front door. My girlfriend and I suddenly both hear the door slam itself shut. We actually saw it happen. But after that, my apartment has felt more peaceful, and I no longer get a bad vibe. I do plan on moving out ASAP, though, for different reasons. When I was around 8 years old, my parents were renting out this house. It was a very nice one-story house at the time, as we lived there for about 3 years. We were not living in a very bad time, however. Today, looking back at the memories in that house, it was definitely haunted. My mother even admits it to this day that something wasn't right in that house. I have multiple crazy instances in that house and how sketchy that place was. Multiple toys turned on in the middle of the night by themselves. I remember all the toys that turned on to this day. One of the toys was an old music box that was my great-grandma's, and the other was a Christmas puppy that would sing up on the housetop. Looking back as a kid, those things never bothered me. For some reason, I couldn't sleep in my room, ever. Another time I experienced some weird crap was when I was asleep. My mom and dad were out in the back having a drink, and my sister, who was about 2 at the time, was being watched by my parents while she was playing with her toys inside. The door was shut. My sister started to cry for some reason, eventually started choking on her saliva, not in a harmful way, and my parents couldn't seem to get the sliding door opened. Well, that was because the wooden stick that was lodged in the door was down in the crevice. We used the wood stick every night just in case anyone tried to intrude or break in. The thing is, we don't know how the stick got in the door. My sister was playing the whole time, nowhere near the end of the door. My parents were freaking out. Went to the side of the house and started pounding on my bedroom window. I could not wake up. They were pounding for a good solid 2 minutes with loud bangs. I am a very light sleeper and always have been. I'll wake up to a quiet alarm easily. I think I had some sort of energy around me to where I couldn't hear anything. They had to break a window with a chair to get her and unlock the door. But that wasn't the scariest thing that happened. I had 2 cousins over, and they were sleeping in my room. I had a trundle bed, or however you say it. We slept with the door closed and fell asleep to some cartoons. By this time, we're all asleep, and I hear a loud bang coming from my door that woke me up instantly. What I woke up to next is the scariest things I have ever seen or been through to this day. Standing in the middle of my door was an angry brunette woman in a white dress. It was the angriest face I have ever seen. I was screaming for my parents and shut my eyes for a few seconds, hoping she would leave, and she did. I ended up crying and sleeping in my parents' room that night. Now, I don't know if it was a real dream or not. The door was opened. I closed it before going to sleep. If it was a dream, then it would have been the realest dream. I remember the setting perfectly. She was literally in my doorway in my room, and everything was the same. It was horrifying. Me personally, I don't think it was a dream. That house had something evil in there. Does anyone have answers for what exactly this could be? It wasn't an animal or cat. It woke my mom up, but she was wide awake when it was happening and not hallucinating, etc. When she heard hissing from inside her closet like something was trying to get out. Her son that lives with her also says he always hears knocking at night. The closet's doors are mirrors. Mirrors and closets are said to be portals. The house in the area does have some history. The area was part of an old town that was totally destroyed by a tornado in the 1800s. And her son also saw a full-body apparition of a man sitting on his bed. This happened many years ago. Does anyone know what this could be? My first thought was a demon, but looking for more in-depth explanations or type of demon entities, etc. Any and all answers and suggestions are very, very much appreciated. Edit. When I said my first thought was a demon, I mean if it's paranormal. Obviously, we're checking for animals and checking for pipe. My first literal thought was a demon. People on Reddit are mostly just vile human beings, but I very much appreciate the few sincere comments. Thanks. I don't know much about this guy, and I don't know if this man is good, bad, or neutral. My sister just told me about this a couple of days ago, and I wanted to post here to see if anyone knows anything. My sister a decade ago said she started to see a man in a top hat in her mirror at night sometimes. No face, all black, definitely a man with a top hat. Around this time, she was playing with Ouija boards, not closing them out, experimenting with drugs, psychedelics, and coke and weed, and being just reckless. She told me she'd see him at night in the mirror, especially on her bad nights. To this day, she says she still sees him, although she's moved now 4 to 5 times. It only takes a bit before she starts seeing him in the mirror at night. My sister also hasn't had any improvement in her life. It's actually much worse. Was a decade ago, unfortunately. She also told me she was having a sleepover with one of her female friends once, a few years ago, who got up to pee, and she said she saw him in the mirror, but thought it was a dream. My question is, does anyone know anything about this man or have any experience with him? I found out I'm not the only one who has saw a lady in my dad's house. So, my dad's family aren't even believers. They're all strong Catholics, mostly. But almost everyone in the house admits they've heard or saw something in the house. Most of us conclude that it's possibly the spirits of my grandparents, who both died in the home and whose ashes are spread in the garden on a rose bush. This is fine. I've also experienced odd or creepy things and have since I was young. Some things I can't explain and some things I fully admit was probably just something else. But when I was in my preteens and younger, I would sleep on my cousin's bedroom floor. My dad stays with my aunt. The bedroom faces a long hallway which leads to stairs. Occasionally, I'd wake up in the night and see what I always thought was a short lady in a long dress holding a tray. All she does is walk downstairs. That's all. I loved horror and ghost shows when I was younger and always just assumed it was my brain regurgitating info I had heard on my TV. Earlier this year, me and that same cousin echoes floor I'd slept on for years found out after doing a bit of Googling that the block of the houses my dad's place is on, the land used to be a factory or something like that. Anyway, last night rolled around and ghosts came into convo between me and my cousin and her boyfriend after he had mentioned seeing and hearing things in the nursing home. I mentioned as a joke I used to think I'd see a lady walk down our stairs, and my cousin looked at me, and her eyes widened and she stood up. She started saying how she always saw it too, and she swears to God sometimes she would see her at the bottom of the stairs also. I'm not really thinking anything deeper of it. Just thought it was cool that I'm not the only person who had saw the same woman. I was 7 years old, and the memory of it down to the last detail is etched in. I was sleeping next to my mom and happened to wake up in the middle of the night to see a little boy dressed in a white shirt and blue shorts, similar to a typical uniform of primary school boys, enter the room. It didn't quite faze me at the point for some reason, but made me wonder who this could be. My first thought was that it was my cousin of the same age, but he wasn't even in the same city. The boy came in and walked towards the wall on the left side of the room. Towards the top of that wall was a Jesus picture, the modern-day white Jesus type, and to the left was a suitcase on the top of which was my favorite stuffed teddy. The boy stood next to the suitcase and seemed to stare at the Jesus picture above him, so I could see his back. I woke up my mom and was pointing to the boy. I asked her who the boy was. She said no one was there. That was when it hit me. I screamed and pretty much had the entire house up, my sisters and my grandparents. I was wailing away in fear, trying to convince my mother the boy was right there and I could still see him. My mother then asked me to close my eyes for a while and check again, which I did. He was still there and my wailing and screaming continued. Then she said she'd pray for me, which she did. After maybe a couple minutes, I'd check again and the boy was gone. At one point, I seemed to remember seeing something whitish dripping off the boy's face, but that bit is quite hazy. It's difficult to say whether it was a hallucination or what. The whole ordeal lasted for at least 15 minutes, while I was up and continued to see the boy throughout the entire thing. Let me start by saying I come from a deeply religious family where we never spoke about the paranormal. That being said, I have had many different experiences in my life that cannot be explained. Before my husband and I moved, we were in a newer townhouse, and we're only the second or third tenants. There were several times I had seen different things on even experienced voices. My stepson even would tell us that his friend Charlie came to visit at night. One night when it was just my husband and I at home, we were together talking in bed, and I started to hear a quiet whistle like a song. I had asked my husband if he could hear it, but he had suggested that it was just the wind. About 5 minutes later, we had continued our conversation, and I had a blinding pain in my head come out of nowhere. At that moment, my husband then heard the whistling. We both stopped and looked at each other, only for the whistling to stop and the sound of footsteps pounding up our hallway stairs. My husband ran outside our bedroom, but there was nobody there. My sudden headache went away. Normally, I wouldn't think it was a nightmare. Both my husband and I heard the whistling, the footsteps, and the pain. When my mother heard about what happened a few weeks later, during a family dinner, she pulled me aside to let me know that I needed to be careful. Because I had always been sensitive to the other side. Needless to say, this specific experience has always stuck with me. Hello all. My grandpa built a house about 45 to 46 years ago, and I have been living there since I was born. I am 30 years old now. We got several paranormal events there that we don't have any answer for those. I was a child around 8 to 9 years old. I was in my room and I was looking for duct tape. I was sure that I had put it on my side, but it was not there. I was looking and suddenly it rolled off to me from nowhere. Sometimes we find our clean clothes in the closet dirty, sometimes yellow drops on them. A few years ago, it was 2 a.m. and I was still working with my PC. The curtain of my room had a curtain tie with wooden ends. Suddenly, it hit to the heater next to the curtain in a hard way, like someone hit the heater with the curtain tie like a whip. It was so weird. A few years ago, it was 9 a.m. I woke up and went to the bathroom. It was 5 a.m. I woke up and went to the bathroom. When I came out, I saw a very strange blue light that was coming from the living room. My mom was there asleep on the sofa. I went further and saw another white light coming from the kitchen. I thought my father or brother was there to grab a glass of water, but I saw a shiny white light spear, almost the size of a basketball, flying in the middle of the room and then just disappeared really quickly. Whatever it was, it saw me and ran away. Once my mom and dad were sitting in the living room and someone said, "Baba," and I was passing there and they asked me if I called them and I said no. Last year, I was alone in the house. I slept in my room, and someone knocked on my door. Like I said, I was alone. A few days ago, something hit the window, and we checked quickly, but nothing was there. There is a long wall around our house, and no one can come in. If you wonder why I'm still living there, I should say that this is my house, and others are not welcome. I just don't want to give it up. I should have no fear in my own home. I did not buy it for someone else to run me away from it like a horror movie. I got another strange event when I was serving in the army, but I'll share that in a different post. Thanks for listening. I'm 26 now. When I was 12 years old, my family had a paranormal experience that to this day I cannot rationalize. In my head, I feel like this was a prank, but there were so many things that happened that I can't explain. And why would 8 adults prank a 12-year-old well into 3 to 4 a.m. in the morning? Since this happened 14 years ago, I don't remember every detail. So a few transitions are missing from memory. Bear with me, and I'll do the best I can to explain it. At the time, my mom and I lived with my aunt and her 2 sons, E and D. E had his girlfriend, Cass, over for the weekend, and D had his best friend, KP, and KP's girlfriend, C, over for the weekend. Along with all of us, we had my great-grandmother with us for the weekend. We call her Mama. We had a full house, to say the least. We were all in the living room talking paranormal topics already. It's a very common topic in my family, as I've been told most of us born with a veil over our eyes, which I'm not 100% sure what it means. From context, I've gathered it means we can see ghosts and are sensitive to paranormal things. My mom says, who slept in the living room on the couch, said that she sleeps facing the back of the couch because she sees things if she does. We asked her what she sees, and she said that she sees faces in the curtains over the windows, and she sees shadows on the ceilings. That's when Cass says that she too sees things, but it's when she closes her eyes. I think cool. She's like a psychic. Cass tells us that when she closes her eyes, she'll get flashes of pictures, but only when she's at our house. We asked her what she sees, and she closes her eyes to tell us. Now, here's where things start to really happen. I'll remind you, this was 14 years ago. I was 12. It was midnight, and I was terrified. I don't remember how we started doing these things. I just remember them happening and being so scared, and they have stuck with me ever since. The one last thing I have to tell you is that in my family we say there's a way to see if a ghost, spirit, paranormal thing, being, has good or bad intentions. If you're confronted with such things, you simply ask them in the name of Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, what do you want? And if it has good intentions, it will give you a sign, or speak to you, or you'll get some type of answer from it. But if it has bad intentions, it will vanish or disappear or leave you alone. It's sort of a temporary banishment, and it will give you time to sort some shit out or give you a breather to think of your next steps. In the living room, Cass was sitting in the big, overstuffed armchair that was big enough for 2 people. My mom was sitting on the arm of the chair, and E was sitting on the other arm. Cass closes her eyes to tell us what she sees. My mom grabs her hand and looks straight ahead, unmoving. We're all confused because Cass opens her eyes and looks at my mom. She's not moving. She's frozen. I'm so confused because I don't know what's going on. Then I see my mom's lips start to tremble and tears slide down her cheek, and I become scared. My mom doesn't cry out of nowhere. I've only seen my mom cry a handful of times. And to see her unmoving, crying, not speaking, I say to the room, someone say it. No one moves. No one speaks. I say it louder. Someone say it. It snaps my aunt out of her stupor, and she looks at my mom with intention and says with sternness, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, what do you want? My mom collapses into Cass's arms and sobs. My mom cries, and we asked her what happened. All she can say is she doesn't know. She couldn't move. She was frozen. We hear Dee gasp from the couch. We look over, and he's covered in scratches on his back and his chest. Now we were all staring at my mom. No one knows how those scratches appeared, but they were there. Big, red, angry scratch marks. Suddenly I hear big, heavy footsteps running down our wooden porch steps outside. I look out the window, but no one's there. We live in the middle of farmland, and the closest house was probably half a mile up the road from us. And this certain porch had a street light that would shine over it. If someone was running away, you would see them for a good 50 yards because of the street light. But there wasn't anyone there. No one running, no one standing there, nothing to explain the sounds, pounding steps we heard. Again, I don't remember why it did. But the next thing I remember happening was my mom, Cass, and KP holding hands in a seance kind of way. Cass had her eyes closed, KP and my mom just sitting there looking at her, and she begins to tell us a story. The story she tells us begins with a husband and a wife. The husband was a very mean man who beat his wife, and the wife had many miscarriages because of it. There was a farmhand, a nice farmhand, who the wife fell in love with. The husband found out, then shot them both, and then himself. When Cass tells us the last line, KP starts to scream, in a very deep voice that didn't seem to be his own. He screams, "You are not safe. You need to leave. Get out. Get out." His face is red, and I can see the strains in his neck as he screams this. He has spit flying from his mouth. I run outside, out the front door. I stand outside in the dark and take shaky breaths until I realize that I heard those pounding footsteps from outside, and outside now as well. I hurry back inside to see what seemed safer than being outside alone. When I get back inside, KP is on his hands and knees vomiting and gasping for breath, but seems to be back to his normal self. After things have seemed to calm down, we all sit in the living room together, not speaking, waiting for the next thing to happen. By this point, it's 3 a.m. I'm sitting in the floor covered in a blanket, and I fall asleep. When I wake up again, everyone is still in the living room, awake, not saying anything. It's 6 a.m. I asked if anything else had happened, and they tell me nothing else happened, and to go to my room and go back to bed, that it was over. The next day, we called a priestess, a woman from our church, to come and bless the house, and asked her how to never have this happen again. She told us to devote our lives to God and to rid anything in our lives that could invite the devil in, meaning our music, TV shows, our way of thinking, anything that was not related to God, or something that could be related to devil worship, needed to change. We did none of that and never had a paranormal experience in that house again. As I said before, there's so many things in this story that seems like a prank. That's the only way I can rationalize what happened. But then who made the footsteps sound outside? The thing that happened to KP? How can you force yourself into straining and changing your voice like that? And to do it so hard, it cause yourself to vomit. Whether this was a prank or a real paranormal experience, I'm not sure. But it happened, and I'm terrified and I'm stuck with this for many years. I have many more stories from my family members if you'd like to hear them. They'd be secondhand stories, though. But I never told anyone this story. My family members have never spoken of this to anyone else as far as I know. They've never had a ha-ha moment or a gotcha moment and revealed it as a prank to me. I do not know what it was that happened that night, but I know I was terrified and traumatized. I live in an apartment complex with 3 units. I'm on the 2nd floor with my neighbor on the other side and a neighbor below. I never had anything happen in this place until my next door neighbor started having a really bad mental episode. I know she struggles with depression and probably BPD. I got to the point where the police kicked her door down for a wellness check. The first experience during this time, I was with friends making dinner when I sat on the couch with my ear pressed against the cushion. While sitting looking at my friends, I started hearing breathing from the cushion. I immediately got up and looked. When I mentioned this to my friend, she said, "Yeah, I didn't want to say anything, but all night I felt like something was watching me." Fast forward a little, and I was going to my bedroom once and feeling a bit creeped out, and I said out loud, "If there's anything in here, can you make yourself known? But don't break anything, please." And that night, while I was in bed, I heard a giant thud against my wall where the bathroom is. My heart was racing. I shot up and checked, and it wasn't my roommate. It was nothing I could see. This was all very brief and pretty much went away after my neighbor got involuntary committed for a while. She came back and was normal, happy, and I have not had issues since then. These two events coincided, and I think her negative, vulnerable mental state invited bad energy or something. Not sure if anyone else has similar brief hauntings, but I wanted to share this just in case. I bought my home 4 years ago and have had a lot of strange things happen while living here. I'm in my 40s, and I never had any paranormal experiences before moving into this house. I have had a lot of lights turning on and off, sinks turning on by themselves, full blast, the vacuum turning on by itself, items disappearing and reappearing, paintings started swinging on the wall, music randomly playing from all the speakers in my home at once. These are the examples. Even the HVAC guy who recently worked on my furnace asked me if my house was haunted because he witnessed things turn on and move on their own. Earlier today, I dropped an earring on the floor. I watched as it dropped and hit the floor. I saw it on the floor. I bent down to pick it up, but it disappeared. It wasn't there. It was there for 1 second and gone the next. I looked all around for it. I got a flashlight, moved furniture that was sort of nearby, and looked underneath. I even got a broom and swept the area trying to find it, but it was gone. It literally disappeared into thin air right in front of me. I felt like I was going crazy. I left the house and went on a long walk to clear my head. I came back, looked for it some more, and again couldn't find it. I then said out loud, "Very funny, you made your point. Just let me find it before I go crazy." I then had an urge to look at a specific place for it and found it. There's no possible way I could have gotten where I found it from where I dropped it. For the record, I do live alone, and no one else was at my house today. So this just happened to me about 2 hours ago. So I'm gonna write this out while it's still fresh. About 3 weeks and 1 day ago, there was an unaliving at my uni campus. Apparently they had jumped from the top floor to the basement area, a lower part of the building that's open to air. Now, I had already woken up that day feeling dread in the air. Ever since I was little, I felt as if I was connected to spirits and ghosts more than others. But I digress. That's a story from another time. Anyways, last night, or the past 3 hours or so, I decided that I would take some pics of campus when it was dark out. I'm not sure why, but I couldn't and still can't sleep. So I figured as well take some creepy or liminal pics. So I went out and took the pictures. But then I decided to go to this building where the incident happened. As soon as I went down the stairs to the lower area, I immediately felt unsafe and as if I was being watched. Something definitely felt off, so I tried to take some quick shots and just to get out. I took about 4 pictures on the leftmost side of the area, then moved to the center part. As soon as I raised my phone to take the picture, I hear something behind me, which sounded like a rustling or a small crack. I pause, and I try to filter the sound out by not acknowledging it. Not 1 second later, I hear a tremendous and loud crunch from my left behind me sighed. I've never been so frozen in fear in my life. I don't even think, and I start walking to the right, as there were stairs there too. I quickly ran up those stairs, then looked back, debating with myself if I should check it out or not. I decided to briefly investigate, so I went near where I thought the sound came from, peered over the railing, and saw nothing. I also felt it important to mention that there is nothing in the basement area that could be capable of making such a noise. I'm back in my dorm now, and out of morbid curiosity, I researched what a body sounds like when it hits the ground. Lo and behold, a loud crunching popping sound. So yeah, I'm not getting any sleep tonight, and I would definitely never go back to anywhere near that building. What do y'all think it was? Once I was driving downtown Tulsa, heading home around 2ish at night. I had come to the point where there was no exits for a good ways, with no one on the road but me in another grayish-black car. I got to the point where I was going to pass this person eventually. They were all over the road, and they finally got into the right lane, and I passed. It was a strange-looking car with black-tinted windows, and just looked odd for some reason. As I passed, their brights came on, and they continued to stay somewhat close. Then all of a sudden, as I was looking down the road, nothing was behind me. No lights, no car, no nothing. No exits in this stretch of road at all. I cannot believe this car had disappeared after it was literally right in my ass and then vanished. I remember thinking I had literally gone mad for a moment there, but I just continued home. Can visiting graveyards cause a haunting? Are woodlice insects of an omen? Bit of context. For past few years, I've been going to visit local cemeteries. This past year, me and my other half have made it a point to visit new locations. We go to places that have basically been forgotten about to offer company and tidy any mess we find. We always try to respect, but now I'm worried I brought something home. After one of our first trips together, I came back home, and during discussing our day with my big sister, a huge wood lice fell from thin air. Surely it couldn't have been on the ceiling. From this day to now, I've stopped seeing them everywhere I go. I know this sounds crazy, but I feel like I've given myself some sort of curse. Yes, it's natural to see them crawling about graveyards, but I don't think they should follow you. Doesn't matter if I'm in the middle of a jungle city or it's the middle of the day. They'll find a way to make an appearance. They've managed to get into my house, and I see them more and more now. One was crawling towards me last night when the lights were still on. To top it off, my partner has just moved into a homeless accommodation. His house is at a very top of the flat. It's concrete flooring. And can you guess what has already made its first appearance? Is it an omen, and what can we do? Weird spooky stuff. The last time I've stayed in the flat, I've heard footsteps up the stairs, and then something strange has happened. First was to do with the heating, so that doesn't bother me as much. But the other night I was sitting in the living room, heard footsteps, then watched the carrier bag across from me being crushed as if someone was holding it and squeezing it. I'm used to spooky stuff. I've got my own ghosty friend. She's called Rhonda. Make it less scary. I don't know if she's chucking woodlice at me, but so far she just moves pens and my lighter anytime I need them. It's just really freaking me out. See comments. I've attached a photo that we took. It's blurry, and I'm not claiming it's 100% anything serious. We took this in the graveyard. I was wanting a photo of the trees to try and draw. Hardly a great reference, but we were drunk. Didn't see the pic till the next day, but doesn't it almost look like someone standing, leaning over the wall? That bit of grass is a mass, unmarked burial spot. Came here hoping anyone could share similar experiences or give some insight. I took a trip to stay in a cabin in the middle of the woods, high up in the mountains of the big city of Ranger, Georgia, USA. This neighborhood was 30 minutes up the mountains, away from civilization, and even the cabins were spread far apart. The front deck of the cabin was completely exposed to the woods, so I acknowledged that any animals could stroll along if they pleased. But I stayed there for about a week. Me and my boyfriend sat outside on the front deck every night, very late, and at no point felt in danger. It was peaceful, with fireflies out and sounds of crickets every night. Until the 5th night, it was eerily dark too. The sun was covered heavily. It was about midnight, and all of a sudden, I didn't feel peace like I did those other nights. The forest went completely quiet, and I felt a horrible sense of dread. I genuinely feared for my life. I sat there in my chair, looking out into the dark forest, trying to rationalize and calm myself down, that it was just my mind playing tricks. But all of a sudden, my boyfriend said out loud that he felt unsafe. That when I realized it wasn't just me. We then both heard a blood-curdling scream, and we pulled out a flashlight to see what it was. Turns out it was a gray fox. They make scary screaming sounds. The weird part was that the fox was running, and its ears and tail down like it was scared. This was in June, and I read that foxes scream like that when it's mating season or they're in danger. Their mating season is in winter, and this happened in June. So I do believe this fox was in danger or afraid as well, adding to our fear. The cabin was 3 floors, and we were able to climb out the window and sit on the roof because we wanted to still be outside and relax. Didn't matter how high up, I still felt something truly evil and stayed inside. The only other time I felt something so evil or like someone was watching was when I had a few paranormal experiences at a haunted house. Georgia really doesn't get mountain lions that often. Maybe a bear, but it didn't feel that way at all. It felt unnatural. I recently joined this sub as I have always had interest in the paranormal world. I believe spirits exist, human and inhuman, but what I'm about to say happened with me. June 30th, 2014, in India. My dad had been in the ICU for nearly a month in a semi-conscious vegetative state owing to tubercular meningitis. It was a private hospital, and so it became very difficult to continue with the treatment for financial reasons. And the doctors there had told us there was no hope either. At that point, we decided to shift him to a renowned government hospital and had to go through a lot of hassles to get him not only admitted to the hospital, but directly into the ICU. So on this very day, we were all set up to move him from the private hospital to the government one. The hospital discharge formalities took several hours, and by the time my dad was put into an ambulance for the shift, it was evening, and it started to pour rain very heavily. My sister and a cousin accompanied my dad in the ambulance, and me, with my uncle, followed them in a car. After traveling for about 45 minutes, there came a junction which usually had heavy traffic jam, and we decided to let the ambulance go in that direction, as cops would let the ambulance pass anyway, and once they get past that signal, it would be a relatively quick drive to the hospital. Me and my uncle took a U-turn to take a different and a slightly longer route, which would have less traffic, so that we could reach the hospital before or at the same time as the ambulance. After taking the U-turn, we continued down the road, and there I saw her, an old lady standing almost at the middle of the road. Skin was as white as paper. She was wearing a white sari and was holding a thick walking stick. It looked more like a branch of a tree, staring in the direction where the ambulance went. She didn't have an umbrella with her, and all the shops were closed because of the rising level of the water in the street. The water had risen to the point where our driver couldn't take his foot off the accelerator, lest the water might seep in through the exhaust. Me and my uncle both saw her, but didn't talk about the experience until a couple days later. My dad had passed away on July 13th. To this day, it still baffles me. What was a lady doing amidst torrential rain in the middle of the road, holding something like a branch of a tree? And I have never ever seen someone having such a pale and white skin. What do y'all think?
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross